Good evening and welcome to BATV News. I'm Keneal Gale. Co-chair of the Economic Program Oversight Committee, EPOC, Keith Duncan, says an appreciating dollar would not help Jamaica meet the IMF inflation target. Mr. Duncan was a guest on BATV's business discussion program On Point last evening. Tashana Small has more.
The EPOC co-chair says if the Jamaican dollar was appreciating against the US currency, then it would be harder to get inflation back on target. Inflation has been trending downwards and is now below the IMF's target range of 4 to 6%.
If we look at, in the last calendar year, I think inflation was like 4.1, 4.2%. So it's been coming down. Now, if you see the thing coming below the range, then you need to accelerate. Having an appreciation of your currency also would not help. Would not help. The fact that our currency appreciated from 130 in I think it was July of last year down to 124, held there for a while. You know what I mean? That would also have had some kind of contribution to the decline in inflation.
He says the current exchange rate and the slide of the Jamaican dollar will increase inflation.
But then the fact that the exchange rate is moving now, it will have a later impact on inflation.
And it's moving very quickly
right.
in the other direction.
Right. Well, we understand where we are in relationship now to the exchange rate. And will it impact? Yes, it will impact inflation. It will impact inflation because, but the pass-through effect of exchange rate now is about 33%. So therefore, the pass-through effect to general price levels across the country is only like at 33%. So therefore, if if your price of your goods move across the economy, move by $10, only $3 of that is linked to the exchange rate movement.
He argues that the dollar at its current exchange rate is competitive, and that is what Jamaicans should focus on maintaining.
You must at all times maintain a competitive exchange rate. You have to maintain a competitive exchange rate.
Is it competitive now?
We are moving into competition. When the dollar appreciated to 124, we lost competitiveness.
Right.
We lost competitiveness, and therefore, while other currencies were depreciating against the US dollar, as the US dollar strengthened, our currency was appreciating. You lose competitiveness against the trading partners and the rest of the world.
So you think where it is now at 136 and change, that's better for us?
Yeah, we are actually just moved back into the competitive range.
For BATV News, I'm Shoshana Small.
In the meantime, the EPOC co-chair says the lower interest rate policy implemented by the Bank of Jamaica is helping to reduce the country's debt faster. Here's more.
At his quarterly press briefing a few days ago, Prime Minister Andrew Holness told journalists that the Ministry of Finance repaid $58 billion of the country's debt last month. EPOC co-chair Keith Duncan accredits this to the lower interest rate policy of the central bank.
Interestingly, interest payments were $2.7 billion behind the budgeted number. Means that lower interest costs as a result of lower interest rates. So that's very positive. And
so
as
that
a
helps
result,
to bring down the debt faster.
Help to bring down the debt faster, and also it gives us more fiscal room because capital expenditures are $1.5 billion ahead of target. So we're spending more than we budgeted for capital expenditure, and capital expenditure is growth enhancing. Stimulates growth.
He points out that government revenue continues to exceed targets.
The fiscal side, we continue to exceed targets and really outperform in a significant way. Updated numbers show at the end of June that our primary surplus target, which was $18 billion, it was exceeded by we're at $31 billion. So we have exceeded our primary surplus target significantly. Tax revenues are over at around $128 billion, approximately $4 billion ahead of target for tax revenues. So therefore, we're still showing some level of buoyancy.
Strong collection.
Strong collection, tax revenues, compliance is good. So doing well. Non-borrowed reserves at $2.4 billion against a target of $2 billion. So therefore, we're ahead of target on reserves. So therefore, on the fiscal side, we're doing well.
Mr. Duncan says this will allow the government to invest more in the economy.
As you create the fiscal space and the fiscal room, you are able to put more into your economy through capital expenditure. And we've seen that across the infrastructure works. And what we want to see is more in human capital now, because these are the areas that are going to increase our productivity in our economy.
For BATV News, I'm Shoshana Small.
Tax Administration Jamaica TAJ says almost all business persons filing GCT returns are now doing so online. The Revenue Collection Agency says the improvement is a direct result of the full implementation of the mandatory e-filing requirement for all GCT-registered taxpayers. The TAJ recently implemented the final phase of its mandatory online GCT requirement with the inclusion of the micro and small GCT taxpayer category. Since the implementation of the mandatory online requirement, the number of returns filed in tax offices has decreased significantly. In November 2017, some 5,000 returns were filed inline. By June 2018, that number decreased to just under 205. Meanwhile, statistics across the 4 main tax offices, that is Kingston, St. Andrew, Mandeville, and Montego Bay, as well as the large taxpayer office, indicate that filing rates stand between 92% and 100%. In the meantime, the TAJ says more people overall are filing GCT returns. In June 2017, the filing rate was 25%, while by June 28, the rate had increased significantly to 95%. The TAJ is reminding business persons that they can still get support to file GCT returns online, as the tax authority continues to provide training support assisting taxpayers to meet the online filing requirement. The Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, KSAMC, says it will be removing illegal signs and billboards erected across the city. Speaking at a recent meeting of the corporation, Kingston's Mayor, Senator Councillor Delroy Williams, said an audit is being undertaken to determine the compliance rate among advertisers. Senator Williams said he's therefore calling on persons and business operators to adhere to the rules of the KSAMC. He told councillors that letters encouraging compliance have been written to persons or companies that have erected signs and billboards without following the proper procedure. The mayor is also encouraging residents and businesses across the municipality to abide by the rules of the KSAMC. And when we come back, PIOJ optimistic about Jamaica's growth trajectory. This and more after the break. Welcome back. Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, Dr. Wayne Henry, is predicting a 15th consecutive quarter of growth for the July to September period. This after the economy grew by 1.8% as at the end of June. However, he's citing extreme weather conditions and global financial crises as possible hindrances. Dr. Henry was speaking at the PIOJ's quarterly press briefing yesterday. Jamila Maitland reports.
Dr. Henry says despite the slow pace of economic progress for 2017, indications are that the economy will continue to strengthen for the rest of 2018 and 2019.
The rate of growth has averaged 1.6% for the first half of calendar year 2018. The forecast for calendar year 2018 is that growth will be in the range of 1.5% to 2.5%. And for fiscal year 2018-19, growth is projected to be within the range of 2% to 3%.
He explained that mining and quarrying agriculture and construction will continue to lead the country's growth.
This forecast is predicated on 1, growth in excess of 20% for the mining and quarrying industry. 2, growth in the agriculture, forestry and fishing industry, which is expected to recover following the contraction in fiscal 2017-18 as a result of flood conditions. And 3, growth in the construction industry, supported by the intensification of major construction projects being undertaken, as well as new projects which are scheduled to commence during the remainder of the fiscal year, including the 3 miles Hagley Park road rehabilitation work, the Constant Spring Road widening and rehabilitation project, the Mandela Highway road rehabilitation project, and hotel construction and expansion projects, as well as residential construction projects.
However, the Director General points out that the recent reports of drought in predominantly agricultural parishes may pose a threat to the forecast.
The primary risks to this growth forecast are the potential impact of adverse weather conditions on domestic production, example drought and hurricane conditions, as well as slower than anticipated growth in the global economy.
He said the team at Statin and the PIOJ will continue to monitor the situation and update the forecast as necessary. For BATV News, I'm Jamila Maitland.
The Statistical Institute of Jamaica Statin says higher petrol prices contributed to a rise in inflation in July. The inflation rate now stands at 3.2% year over year, following inflation of 1% in July. This brings the nation closer to the IMF's target of at least 3.5% and the Bank of Jamaica's target of at least 4% inflation. The figures were outlined in the Consumer Price Index (CPI) bulletin released by Statin yesterday. More in this report.
The latest Consumer Price Index CPI report shows that during July, inflation went up by 1%. That's a 0.6% jump over the 0.4% figure reported for June. Statin says the largest increase for the calendar year to date was influenced mainly by a 3.4% rise in the index for the division, housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels. For this division, the group's electricity, gas, and other fuels reflected increases of 5.8%, while water supply and miscellaneous services related to the dwelling increased by 1.6%. This resulted from increased electricity, water, and sewage rates. A 0.8% increase in the index for the transport division was reported, with Statin saying this was primarily due to higher petrol costs, which also contributed to the movement in the inflation rate. The food and non-alcoholic beverages division also increased, recording an inflation of 0.9%. This was influenced by a 2.9% upward movement in the vegetables and starchy foods because of higher prices for products such as carrot, cabbage, tomato, and yam. A breakdown of the 3 regions for the month showed that the Greater Kingston metropolitan area and other urban centers each recorded a 1% increase in their index, while the index for rural areas rose by 0.9%. In the meantime, the calendar year-to-date inflation stood at 0.7%, while the movement in the index for the fiscal year-to-date was 1%, and the point-to-point movement was 3.2%. For BATV News, I'm Jamila Maitland.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the housing developments taking place in Hanover will help to strengthen the parish's tourism product. He was speaking at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Cove Manor housing development. Nordia Francis Williams has more.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says tourism is a critical part of the long-term development of Hanover, and plans are already in place to ensure residents benefit.
In terms of the long-term development of the parish, we see where tourism will have a significant role in the development of the parish. And we are already working on plans to ensure that we have orderly development of the tourism product that will provide the employment and the income for the average Hanoverian.
The Industry Cove Manor housing scheme will have 23 detached 2-bedroom and 4 2-bedroom townhouse units. The development spans almost 5 hectares. Prime Minister Holness says the scheme will provide housing for tourism workers.
There is a growing tourism industry here which brings many tourist workers. And what we don't want to happen to Hanover is what we have seen happening in other parishes, where the tourism product comes, we didn't plan to have housing for the workers, and then we end up with communities that end up in conflict with the tourism product. So we are being very proactive.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister reminded residents that they have a responsibility to protect the tourism product.
People come to visit you. And if people are hearing that there is violence and they're not safe, when they come, if they come, they're going to lock up in their hotel. And that just locks off the money from you, because all of you can work in the hotel. So it is in your interest to make sure that you create a climate and an atmosphere in your communities that people can choose to come and visit you.
For BATV News, I'm Norda Francis Williams.
Stay with us. Regional and international stories are up next. Welcome back. Time now for regional and international news. Come November, U.S. carrier American Airlines will be providing direct flights to Georgetown, Guyana. More in this report.
The runway has been cleared and U.S. carrier American Airlines has been granted full approval by the government to begin its touchdown into the Guyana market. Minister of State Joe Harmon announced at his post-cabinet briefing today that the cabinet has granted its full approval for the airline to start its scheduled service to Guyana. He said that approval came after the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority found the airline's application to be satisfactory. American Airlines will begin its service in mid-November with 4 flights per week between Miami and Georgetown. Airline officials have already visited Guyana and have briefed the local authorities on their plans for the local market. Although American will be flying between Miami and Georgetown, it will offer connecting flights to all other destinations through Miami. And the airline is also expected to look at other U.S. markets to begin direct service to Guyana in the future. American Airlines is one of the largest U.S.-based carriers.
Ecuador and Peru are tightening border control to curb the rising influx of migrants who are fleeing Venezuela. Here's more.
A scene that is now common on the Ecuadorian-Colombian border. Thousands of Venezuelan migrants wait here every day, hoping to cross.
We are coming because the humanitarian situation is becoming more serious in Venezuela. There are rumors the border will be closed. That is why so many people are taking advantage of it.
The Ecuadorian government says Venezuelans will now need passports to enter the country. Before, they could travel with their ID cards. With this measure, they hope to reduce the flow of migrants. Last week, the government declared a state of emergency following the daily arrival of some 4,200 Venezuelans. The United Nations estimates that 2.3 million Venezuelans fled the country as of June. Over 800,000 are currently in Colombia and 400,000 in Peru. 109,000 are in Ecuador and 48,000 in Brazil. Many refugees arrive penniless and looking for work. Governments say they do not have the resources to cope with so many people. On Saturday, 5,000 Venezuelans crossed into Peru, which will also increase border control.
At least here we can eat. Food is cheap in Colombia, Ecuador and Peru. In Venezuela, food prices hit the roof.
But the restrictions might not keep migrants from fleeing. The shortage of basic goods and hyperinflation in Venezuela are the main reasons these refugees are leaving the country. Aid agencies say over 15% of Venezuelan children are malnourished, and formerly eradicated diseases like measles are now on the rise.
Hundreds of Google employees have signed a protest letter over the company's reported work on a censor-friendly search engine to get back into China. More in this report.
We need to know what we're building. In a letter to their leadership, staff at Google voiced their concern over Dragonfly, a project that the company has been secretly running to get back into China. Angry about being kept in the dark until media reports surfaced, the employees argued that developing an app that complies with Beijing's government censorship violates the company's principles. At a monthly meeting on Thursday, CEO Sundar Pichai admitted the new search engine is being developed, saying that providing more services in the world's most populous country fits Google's global mission. No target release date has yet been announced. The move comes 8 years after Google publicly left China in protest to censorship. Staff say a return to the Chinese market raises urgent moral and ethical issues. According to media reports, the company plans to block some websites and search terms in order to gain approval from the Beijing government. The letter is the latest action taken by Google's workforce. Earlier this year, they spoke out against Maven, a secretive military project in which Google provided AI drone imaging. Following staff complaint, the company announced that it would not renew its contract with the Pentagon.
Although there isn't any progress on the row between Turkey and the U.S., some traders were encouraged as Qatar offered to give Turkey $15 billion of investment, giving the lira a 3% boost. More in this report.
As relations with the United States deteriorate, Turkey turns to Qatar for help. During a meeting in Ankara on Wednesday, Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani pledged to inject $15 billion worth of investments into the Turkish economy. The lira had already begun to stabilize after the Turkish central bank vowed to provide all liquidity needed by the country's banks. The currency had nosedived to record lows over the past couple weeks amid diplomatic and trade disputes with Washington. After Donald Trump announced sanctions on 2 Turkish government ministers and double tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, Turkey retaliated with tariffs on U.S. products, including cars, tobacco, and alcohol. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the move was a regrettable step in the wrong direction.
Tariffs that the United States placed on Turkey were out of national security interest. Theirs are out of retaliation. I'm not going to get ahead of anything on what we may or may not do in an effort to respond, but certainly we don't support Turkey's decision to retaliate against us protecting our national security interest.
At the origin of the crisis, Andrew Brunson, an American pastor that has been held in Turkey for over a year and a half on espionage and terror-related charges. Though American officials and Brunson himself insist he is innocent, Ankara has refused to release him.
Stay with us. Talking Stocks comes up next. Welcome back. Time now for Talking Stocks. 58 stocks traded today, of which 20 advanced, 31 declined, and 7 traded firm. The main JC index declined by 2,106 points to close at over 315,000 points. The junior index declined by 6 points to close at 3,193 points. Over 16 million units traded today, valued at more than $67 million on the Jamaican dollar market. While on the US dollar market, 63,200 units traded, valued at $11,508 US. JMMB Group preference shares with over 8.5 million units trading accounted for 53% of market volume. India's Pharma Ordinary shares with over 2 million units trading was second, and Mayberry Jamaican Equities with a little over 1 million units trading accounted for 6% of market volume, which crossed the floor. Jamaican Teas was the top advancer, up 34 cents to close at $4.24, followed by Mayberry Jamaican Equities up 51 cents to close at $9.48, and Everything Fresh up 11 cents to close at $2.29. The main decliners were Cygnus Credit Investments ordinary shares down $1.36 to close at $10.01. followed by stationery and office supplies down 83 cents to close at $8.15, and Pulse Investments down 20 cents to close at $2.80. In foreign exchange trading, the Jamaican dollar gained on all three major trading currencies today. The US dollar ended the day trading for an average $137.22, losing 13 cents to the Jamaican dollar. The Canadian dollar ended the day selling for $103.22, losing 78 cents to the Jamaican dollar. And the British pound ended the day trading for $173.69, losing 62 cents to the Jamaican dollar. And that's the news, but before we go, a recap of our top story. Co-chair of the Economic Program Oversight Committee, EPOC, Keith Duncan, says an appreciating dollar would not help Jamaica meet the IMF inflation target. Thanks for watching. For more content, please visit our website at batvja.com. I'm Kenil Gale. Have a great weekend.